Hello, Algebra Honors. This is Unit 8, Day 4, classwork. So we've already done a video for going through the notes, and hopefully you've tried this classwork and you are just popping in to see if you got answers correct, or if you had questions on specific questions. You might be looking to see how we did each problem step by step. So Unit 8 is our unit on quadratics, and Day 4 we are using the quadratic formula, which is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we are finding the value for x, or sometimes the values for x, which make the whole function equal to 0. We're finding the zeros, or the roots, or the solutions, or the x-intercepts. All right, so every single time I look at one of these problems, I'm going to write down what is my A, what is my B, what is my C, and then I'm just going to plug that information into this formula. So I'm finding the value for x that's going to make this true. So I'm going to say x equals negative b, so it's the negative of negative 19, plus or minus the square root of negative 19 squared, minus 4 times a times c, all over 2a, all over 2 times a. Okay, and so I'm going to use a calculator for some of these bigger numbers, of course. And so I'm simplifying this, and I know that I have x equals 19 plus or minus the square root of 361 minus 280 all over 2. And I'll simplify some more. I know that that's going to be 19 plus or minus the square root of 81 all over 2. Okay, what that means is I have two possible answers, 19 plus 9, right, because the square root of 81 is 9 over 2, and also 19 minus 9 over 2. Okay, so these are my possible answers. That's 28 over 2, which is 14, and this is 10 over 2, which is 5. And so I know that my answer would be x equals 5 and 14. Those are the possible answers for x, that if I plug those in, my whole, if I plug in 5 as x, my whole function equals 0, and if I plug in 14, it also equals 0. All right, so we're going to look at number 2, and again, I know a equals 2, b equals 37, and c equals negative 19. So I'm just going to plug all this in. I'm going to slide my paper over. Okay, so I have x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared, big number there, minus 4ac. Square root of all of that, and it's all over 2a. When I simplify this, I know x equals negative 37 plus or minus, I'm going to use a calculator, of course, to figure out the square of 37, so I have 1369, and then plus 152 when I do that other math, and it's all over 4. Okay, so x equals negative 37 plus or minus the square root of 1521 all over 4. And when I think about that one on a calculator, I know that I have negative 37 plus or minus 39 all over 4. This means that my two possible answers are negative 37 plus 39, so that's going to be 2 over 4, and 2 over 4 equals 1/2, right? And the other option is negative 37 minus 39, which is going to be negative 76 over 4, which simplifies to negative 19. Okay, so my answer is negative 19, comma 1/2, like that. Okay, and you could see that all, yay! All right, so when I look at problem 3, I'm going to notice that it's actually not set equal to 0. So I'm going to rewrite it. So I have x squared minus 10x minus 75 equals 0. Okay, because every single time what I'm trying to do is find the value that works for 0, that works as x that will make the whole thing equal to 0. Okay, and so a equals 1, b equals -10, c equals -75. That means x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, and so I have x equals +10 plus or minus the square root of 100 plus 400, I believe that is, all over 2. Sorry, this is 300 right here. And so the whole thing is going to end up being 10 plus or minus the square root of 400. Sorry, I was jumping the gun. Over 2. We know the square root of 400 is 20. So I know I can say x equals 10 plus or minus 20 over 2. So I know if it's 10 plus 20 over 2, it equals 30 over 2, which is 15. If it's 10 minus 20 over 2, it equals -10 over 2, which is -5. So x equals -5, 15 would be my answer. Okay. Number 4, we're also not quite in the right order. So I'm going to say 6x squared plus 13x minus 28 equals 0. Slide over. Okay. So I know a equals 6, b equals 13, c equals -28. Okay, so x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, and make sure you've tried these on your own, and if you haven't yet, go ahead and pause and come back and check. Okay, so as I simplify that, I know x equals -13 plus or minus the square root of, I'm going to go ahead and do all this math right now, and I get 841 over 32. Okay, so 32, listen to me, that's not correct. Hold on. Sorry, that's not 16, that's 6. I'm making stuff up. So that makes that 12. Sorry about that. -13 plus or minus the square root of 841 all over 12. And so I know that x equals -13 plus or minus 29 all over 12. That means that x equals -13 plus 29 is 16 over 12, which is the same as 4/3. Or my other option is -13 minus 29 is -42 over 12. I'm going to divide each by 6, and so I have -7/2. So those are my answers. X equals -7/2 or 4/3. Okay. All right. I hope you could see that all. I'm so sorry. I think you just couldn't see that for a brief moment. Okay. Again, this is not set equal to 0, so I'm going to set it equal to 0. 4x squared minus 7x plus 2 equals 0. So a equals 4. There you can see that. B equals -7. C equals 2. So x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so I have 7 plus or minus the square root of 49 minus 32 all over 8. All right, and so that is the same thing as 7 plus or minus the square root of 17 over 8. Now you can leave your answer like that. That is fine with me if you are allowed to leave your answer in radical form. If not, you would use a calculator to approximate the square root of 17. And you would say 7 plus that divided by 8, and also 7 minus that divided by 8. Okay, so number 6, I also am not in the correct form yet, so I'm going to add x squared to each side. So I have 2x squared I'm going to subtract 8x from each side, and then I end up with 2x squared minus 8x plus 3 equals 0. So now I know A equals 2, B equals negative 8, and C equals 3. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So x equals 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 minus 24 all over 4. X equals 8 plus or minus the square root of 40 over 4, which means 8 plus or minus 2 roots of 10 over 4. Now, I would actually simplify this one more time because you can divide every single term here by 2. So I would say that this is 4 plus or minus the square root of 10 all over 2. That's how I would leave my final answer. All right, so we have some application that we're going to look at as well, real-life applications. And so in this problem, a golf ball is chipped into the air from a small hill of 10 feet, and the ball travels with an upward velocity of 50 feet per second, and its path is modeled by this equation. So we want to know how long it will take for that ball to hit the ground. So here's our golfer person with a golf club. Oops, you can't see, sorry. Our golfer person with a golf club hits the golf ball and it goes up in the air and then it goes back down again, right? We want to know how long it takes for it to hit the ground again. So I know H is for height and T is for time. When I'm looking at that golf ball, it's hit the ground, so that means its height is 0. So recognize that we are saying 0 equals negative 16t squared plus 50t plus 10. So we're just solving a quadratic, right? We're finding the zeros. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. But we don't want x, we want t this time. And so we're going to say t equals, well, I should have probably written down, my a is negative 16, b is 50, and c is 10. So let's go ahead and say t equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, and so we're going to simplify. That's going to mean that t equals, I'm going to put this in a box. I feel like that's messy. Too close. Okay, so t equals negative 50 plus or minus, we're going to say it's the square root of 2500 plus 640 all over negative 32. Okay, so t equals negative 50 plus or minus the square root of 3140 all over negative 32, which means this plus or minus, well, and square root of 3140 didn't simplify to be an integer, so I'm going to use my calculator, okay, and I'm going to say 3140 and hit the square root button. Square root. 56.035. I'm going to write 56.04. 56.04. So I'm approximating that. Okay, and it's all over negative 32. Okay, so I end up with negative 50 plus, we're going to do up here, negative 50 plus 56.04, so that's going to be 6.04 over negative 32. Which is negative 0.188. Or negative 0.19. And then my other option is negative 50 minus 56.04. So I get negative 106.04 over negative 32. And this time, in my calculator, I get 106.04 4 divided by 32. I get 3.31. All right, so we wanted to answer the question, how much time does it take for us to have that golf ball land on the ground? It's either negative 0.19 seconds or 3.31 seconds. Well, we don't go back in time. We don't have negative time. So in all honesty, this is going to be our final answer. It took 3.31 seconds for that to land on the ground. All right, so my next problem, where we're talking about actual applications, we have a garden. It's in the shape of a rectangle. So here's our rectangle. We know the area of the garden is 712 feet because they tell us it has to cover 712 square feet. Okay, the length is 4 feet more than the width. So we need to find our dimensions. Okay, so the length is whatever the width is plus 4, and then this is the width. So here's what I know about area. Area equals length times width, which means area equals, I'm going to put everything in terms of one variable. So I have width plus 4 times W, right? Length times width. And so I know my area is W squared plus 4W. Okay? Area is W squared plus 4W. So if I want to find my dimensions, I'm going to set that whole thing equal to 0. I want to know what can W be here. So 0 equals W squared plus 4W. And I'm going to go ahead and use my quadratic formula. Sorry. My area is not 0. My area is 712. So we're going to pretend I didn't just say the area was 0. We're going to say the area is 712. Forgive me. We know that because we were told in the problem the area is 712. So I am going to set it equal to 0 is what I was trying to make a point of. So the whole thing equals 0. And so that means I have to subtract 712 from each side, right? So W squared plus 4W minus 712. Okay, now I'm going to find out what values of W make this whole thing equal to 0. And so I'm going to use my quadratic formula. So I'm going to say A equals 1, B equals 4, there's B, and C equals negative 712. So I'm not looking for X, I'm looking for W, so I'm going to say W equals negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC all over 2a. And so that means that I have negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 plus 2848 all over 2. Okay, my W, I'm going to come over here so I have more room. W equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 plus 2848, which is 2864. All over 2, and I'm going to use my calculator to find out what is the square root of 2864. So I'm going to approximate. So if I say negative 4 plus that, all divided by 2, I'm going to have 24.76. If I say negative 4 minus that, all divided by 2, I'm going to have negative 28.76. But we're trying to figure out what are the dimensions, and so it doesn't make sense to have a negative dimension, right? So I know my width is 24.76, and now my length is 4 more than that, so that's 28.76. Okay, so that's my answer. Remember, it was asking for both dimensions, so you want to make sure you give them both. Okay. The product of two positive consecutive integers is 56. So we know that on a number line, any numbers that are side by side are consecutive. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 3 and 4 are consecutive. 4 and 5 are consecutive. Okay, I have the product of two positive consecutive integers is 56. So here's what I know. If I am not sure what my first integer is, it's going to be x. The next consecutive integer has to be x plus 1. That's just how that is on any number line. So I don't know what the first one is, but the second one has to be x plus 1. I want the product, so I'm going to say x times x plus 1 equals 56. Okay, I'm thinking x has to be 7, just thinking. 7 times 8 is 56, but let's pretend I don't know how to do that. So we're going to say x squared plus x equals 56, which means x squared plus x minus 56 equals 0. And again, I really feel like I can figure this one out without using the quadratic formula. It would work, but let's see, two numbers that multiply to give us negative 56, but add to give us 1. We're going to say negative 8 and 1. Is that right? Negative 8 times 1. Sorry. We're going to say positive 8 and negative 7. 8 times negative 7 is negative 56. 8 plus negative 7 is 1. And so I know that this is x plus 8 times x minus 7 equals 0. So think back. If we are solving by factors, we know this means that either x plus 8 equals 0 or x minus 7 equals 0. One or the other, or both. So x equals negative 8 or 7. And those, nope. X equals positive 8, gracious sakes. Because we have to subtract 8 from each side. Sorry, 8 has to be x plus 8 times x minus 7. Hold on. Sorry, it really is negative 8 and 7 as my answers. Here's the thing. In my problem, it says they have to be two positive consecutive integers. That's not positive, so we're taking him out of the running. So x equals 7 is my first integer, and then my second integer, x plus 1, equals 8. So my two integers are 7 and 8. Okay, so my answers are 7 and 8. So I was right. I just made myself worried. I had to read through the problem again. All right, thanks so much for watching, and tune in for the next day 5.